Hello everybody and welcome back to the Bayonetta 2 walkthrough. It's time for Chapter 5, the Cathedral of Cascades. But before we do that, we are going to go into the Gates of Hell. Because I want to buy some stuff. Most notably, witch hearts. So, I'm not going to buy the alternate for Undine just yet. But I'll probably get it eventually. I will point out that I'm going to be using the weapon not to its fullest extent until later on, but there will be a point where I'm using it properly. I mean, technically there's no proper way of using the weapon, but I'll be using a technique that is much more successful at freezing enemies, which is what it's excellent at, and is a technique that you should certainly think about using, because it means that you can get free hits on enemies and also rack up combo points like no other, especially when put into a combo with another weapon that we'll be getting later. Now, it's certainly slower than the Rakshasa Blades and Love is Blue, but having that sort of thrower ability and its slowness, it's just, I think, a little bit more powerful and is also incredibly useful. And yeah, this cutscene introduces a few little problems for numerous people, and it's something I'm going to discuss in this part. But its purpose is that we can now get a new animal within form, which is Snake Within, allowing us much easier traversal through water, which is grand.
Why did you have to go and do that, little one? Wake up. Damn it. Wake up! Enough jokes. Wake up!
Love, you can't let kids' jokes make you that mad.
And what about you? Do you really think it's safe to play dead with someone who can make you dead?
Men like to gamble, love.
Risking everything for nothing. Seems about right. I know another little boy just like that.
Sounds like my kind of guy. Maybe a bit of a pervert, though. Let's go. We're almost to the cathedral.
And so here we are at the Cathedral of Cascades, or just outside it. But we've got a journal echo, City of Water. The Water Capital, that's my name for this town. Noatun is surrounded by oceans and lakes. The sea provides more than enough for the residents to sustain themselves. The snow from the peak of Fimbulventa melts into a river that flows to the base of the mountain. The river provides drinking water for Noatun's inhabitants, then eventually collects to form a breathtaking lake. At the lake there is the Cathedral of Cascades, an ancient piece of architecture with a very mystifying presence. Though some of this ancient building still holds together, including its unique pointed roof, the pathway that once connected the city to the mountain's peak has crumbled to the bottom of the lake. Which is a shame, but oh well. Now, there is an optional verse that will appear here, but I can't quite remember when it activates. So our first task is going to be collecting the Umbran Tears of Blood that is just in that fallen bit of bridge just there. Basically, to get it, you've got a Panther within, and you should be fine. And then we're going to get this broken Umbran resting place, and it's going to be good. Now, my main area of discussion, I think, for this part is going to be the sexual politics of Bayonetta. A very dangerous topic to discuss, I know, and also probably very controversial. But I think for the purposes of Bayonetta, and the fact that it is such a contemporary issue in video gaming, it's worth discussing, really. So, the main issue that people have with Bayonetta is that she's ridiculously over-sexualized. The people who don't like the character kind of see her as being created by men, for men, her only purpose is to titillate. And it's just disgusting. On the other side of that, there is the fact that Bayonetta herself was actually designed by a woman. Try and get her name up. I know what it is, but memory is absolutely atrocious. But basically, she's designed by a woman, and to be perfectly honest, when you see the designs in the Eyes of Bayonetta art book, particularly for the original game, Bayonetta could have been in much less clothing. Like, some of the designs were really out there. Like, insanely out there. Like, there was hardly any clothing at all. But, yeah, so there's that. And there's also the fact of, at least the way I perceive it, and I know numerous other people do as well, whenever there's the sexual stuff happening, it's generally when Bayonetta, as a character, is in control of what's happening. She only does it when she's having her sort of sadistic fun. And yeah, it just works better, I feel. And it does work.
Is that all you've got?
Now, I do have a slight problem with Bayonetta 2's representation of her character, more so because of the plot than anything else. And just a quick note, Bayonetta was designed by Mari Shimazaki, who is the female designer who I was talking about. And for anybody wondering why the hell she's so long-limbed, it's basically because she's modelled after, like, fashion drawings, which are always very tall, very thin, very long-limbed, and so that's where the design comes from. And yeah, I do honestly feel that as a character she is in control of herself. Now, the problem that I have with Bayonetta 2, and I will say, I don't think that Bayonetta 2 is nearly as sexualized as Bayonetta 1. Because Bayonetta 1, like, some of the stuff was ridiculous. Like, the torture attack on the female angel Joy, for example. That was ridiculous. Because it was the wooden horse. And the moan of pleasure, or pain, and the glowing crotch areas. So while the opening of Bayonetta 2 is arguably way more sexualized than most of the stuff in Bayonetta 1, the rest of the game never really follows through with that. So it's not that bad. What Bayonetta 2 does do, however, is that it takes away some of Bayonetta's epicness. So at the end of every boss fight in Bayonetta 1, you got kind of cutscenes showing Bayonetta's sadistic destruction and obliteration of the cardinal virtues. So Bayonetta was always in control and always a complete and utter badass. What Bayonetta 2 does is, like, you'll finish a boss fight and then something will happen which means that you don't get quite full satisfaction out of beating them, because Bayonetta gets screwed over in some way, shape or form. And while I guess it does show that she's fighting challenging enemies and stuff, it don't quite work for me, and I think in terms of for Bayonetta's character, it takes away some of her agency and makes her not quite the amazing, powerful woman that she is normally. Having said that, I think it's not a case that they did anything to her character, because, I mean, she's certainly more emotional now because she's got her memories back. And I think that does make her sort of... she's not just vacant. But I think they did mess up on the plot a bit in not having satisfying conclusions to the fights. Anyway, Underground Graveyard. There is said to be a resting place for the servants of God in the Cathedral of Cascades, submerged underground. The locust told me of a terrible guardian that prowls the corridors, devouring the soul of any fool who trespasses in that sacred place. The people of this town must be fed up with me sticking my inquisitive nose in where it doesn't belong. Why else would they concoct such a ludicrous tale? This phrase, servants of God, calls to mind images of ordained prophets passing down divine wisdom. I imagine these disciples also played a part in the shadowy past of the witch and the sage. I will find clues to the origins of these clans somewhere in this cathedral. I can feel it. The natives here don't know who they're dealing with. It takes more than a few tired ghost stories to put a damper on the journalistic fire of one Mr. Luca Redgrave. And that's because Luca is awesome, even if he is a hell of a lot more of a goofball in this game and doesn't really do a whole lot. If anything, like, this is kind of going into my overarching problems with Bayonetta 2 in comparison to the first one, because, like, I mean, I love both of the games a lot, and while Bayonetta 2 makes a huge number of improvements over the original Bayonetta in streamlining, cutting out some of the ridiculously cheap moments and all that jazz, it loses stuff, and certain elements I don't think are quite as well thought through. And the plot stuff is one of them. Because even though it's simple and you get through and the progression's fine, it's not quite got the same level of satisfying build-up as the original game.
They don't look like your kind of normal attention. A friend, love?
I think my friends and I might have had a falling out. Why would Infernals be after me?
Something's up. The balance of powers that keep things in check don't feel right, does it?
Good to know some of you are keeping your part of the contract. Let's do this.
And so we begin our fight against Pain, which I believe is actually our first demon encounter outside of Gamora. And it's the really cool thing about Bayonetta 2 is that you actually begin to face off against demons. And the other cool thing is that they are very distinctly different to the angels in that they're all very mechanical. It's kind of very interesting because the higher demons are all very organic and fleshy demons, and the lower stuff is all mechanical. In contrast, with the angels, the lower sphere angels are all kind of very fleshy, and the higher tiers are all surprisingly mechanical and have huge mechanical parts. I mean, Sapientia is a perfect example. But pain is down. Oh yeah! And that opens the floodgates so that now we are going to have water to swim through. Yay! Now, that demon weapon is very powerful, and I kind of messed up because I wanted to keep it for longer, but that didn't end up happening. Anyway, trademark. Crests are often used to show the lineage and ancestry of a people. The Umbra and Lumen also used such crests to represent their clans. The symbols were based on the object of each clan's respective ideology, the moon for the witches and the sun for the sages. These distinctive symbols, etched upon every Lumen or Umbran object of any importance, make an investigative journalist's job easy. A single glance tells you from which culture an object came from. The Umbran tombs sealed away by the Lumen are a unique example, with an Umbran seal on the tomb and a Lumen seal on the marker atop it. They bear the motifs of both the sun and the moon. A crest also exists for Aesir, the god of chaos. Carvings of this symbol are a familiar sight around Noatun. Made up of a series of overlapping diamonds, each component is said to represent a single layer in the matrix of time and space that form our universe. There is a piece of metal embedded within Aesir's crests that shines with an eerie glow. I've heard it contains some deeper significance, but I'm going to need a bit more time to crack this particular chestnut. And something that I will point out about Chapter 5 here is that even though it's being cut into a two-parter, it's really not that long. Like, Bayonetta 1's Chapter 5 was ridiculous, and was arguably the hardest chapter in the entire game, because it was so long, and because the game was so stingy on its health items. Whereas this, you can skip through it fine, and really there aren't that many hugely long chapters. It's an instance of Bayonetta 2 cutting out the chaff, making things quicker, more accessible, and mostly better, but I do believe that there is multiple instances of over-streamlining. Anyway, this is a really, really ridiculously easy Muspelheim. It says don't fall to the ground. It basically means you can fight on that podium, but you can't fall off it or let the angels destroy it. But anyway, Muspelheim done, it's time to head on and continue with Chapter 5. Yay!